Hey guys, what is up? This is Nathan Davis, me once again. Welcome back to another movie review. Continuing on with my horror movie review marathon, this time I'm going to be reviewing The Exorcist. I reviewed this on my channel already. I mean, most of the horror reviews I did are, almost all of them are reviews for movies that I reviewed already, but I tend to remake them, so yeah, I'm remaking my review of The Exorcist. I just rewatched it. Now, of course, if you don't know what the story of The Exorcist is, it's fairly simple, okay? There's this girl named Reagan who seems like a nice girl, but when she starts getting sick, she's not really getting sick, she starts doing weird things, and during those weird things, it turns out she becomes possessed. And of course, this guy named Damien, who is with his mother, tends to be a priest. And when Reagan's mother tends to request help from him, he then, of course, has to, perform an exorcism to lift the curse from poor Reagan. Of course, if you don't know the story, then it's kind of ridiculous, because almost every horror fan is pretty familiar with this film. The movie was very controversial when it was released. It's a demonic possession film filled with a lot of satanic themes. At the same time, it was also widely successful, grossing over $400 million worldwide, and even received multiple Oscar nominations and won two. Rightfully deserved so. And just what made The Exorcist such a big hit? Is it the fact that it's a demonic movie? It's due to the fact that it was just so scary when it was released. While nowadays most people don't really feel like it's as scary as most people say it is, I can definitely see why, because the movie kind of lacks in music, pretty much. If you watch this movie today and you were watching this movie back in the 70s, there would be kind of a difference, because nowadays, when it comes to horror is far more different than it was back then. I mean, back then, horror was made on much lower budgets, and they didn't have much to do with the effects. But with the effects, I think the effects in this movie today still hold up. Like the way Reagan looks when she's possessed, and the dubbing too. The dubbing was fantastic. Like the way the demon sounds, and Reagan's performance, Linda Blair, who plays Reagan alone, she's terrific. And everyone else gives a very strong and believable performance. And sure, it definitely does take time for the build-up. I mean, the movie starts off in Iraq, and when I first watched the movie, I was a bit confused, but definitely at first glance. But when it comes to getting older and watching the film at an older age, it definitely does feel like it has much more of a purpose. And it does. And the movie definitely is a slow-moving film. Like, the demonic stuff doesn't really happen until, 40 minutes into the movie. And when it does get to the demonic stuff, it's insane. And sure, it's not as effective as some other demonic horror films that come out nowadays, but nowadays when it comes to demonic films, they're all pretty cliched, but this is the one to rule them all. And sure, it definitely does lack in terms of jump scares, but that's a good thing. If this film was just jump scare after jump scare after jump scare after jump scare, it just wouldn't be effective. That's one thing that you gotta love about classic horror, is that when it comes to supernatural horror films, they don't always go for the jump scare route. And that's exactly what The Exorcist does. When it does, it's usually due to demonic faces of the main demon that shows up throughout the movie. And it's creepy, and it definitely gives you the chills, at least if you were watching it back then. And today, even today, if you were watching it at a teenage, it would definitely crawl under your skin a bit. And what's also very unique about this film, and it's something that I kind of haven't really noticed that often, but I mean, I watched the film multiple times, is that there isn't that many deaths in the movie. In fact, there exist a lot of horror movies where people don't die. I mean, Poltergeist. I don't remember anyone dying in Poltergeist. Except for the bird. But it's a bird. And The Conjuring, nobody died in that. And while we don't really see anyone die in Blair Witch, we suppose that they did in the end of Blair Witch, but I don't know, it's kind of different. But, I mean, there is deaths in this movie, but it's not due to kills, okay? In fact, there's like one death total, spoilers by the way, and that's due to, okay, well, there's technically like three, but they don't die from getting killed, they die like the traditional way. And of course, the priest tend to letting the demon possess him and jumping out the window to sacrifice getting rid of the demon. I honestly thought that was one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, just for the fact that he was willing to give himself up just for the curse to be lifted, pretty much. Even to this day, I still think it's a very creepy watch. Like, it definitely has a slow burning move and some really gross imagery, like, of course, you know, the vomit and stuff, but the vomit was pea soup, pretty much. And even the vomit alone, if it was made today, they would probably just use CGI. But that's the problem with most horror movies, or specifically, you know, supernatural possession movies, is that they go in for more, like, trying to go in your face with all of its creepy visual effects. But I feel like The Exorcist had more than enough, even if it doesn't seem like much. Like, of course, when the devil's just, like, you know, rising up, and you don't see any wires or anything like that, and the way the devil looks, and the holy water when it scratches her leg, the movie had so much going for it, and I still think to this day it is more than worth a watch. And it's definitely for people who haven't even seen most horror movies. This is definitely a great one to start with. Hell, I watched this movie when I was like 13. My mom let me watch it. She had no idea it would be that disturbing. Like, there is some really disturbing moments that definitely are kind of hard to watch. Like, of course, the crucifix scene, just like, oh. But the movie had a lot going for it, and today it's still a memorable horror film, even if it isn't as well-paced as some other horror films. If you expect, like, a lot of deaths, if you expect, like, a lot of jump scares, you're not going to get that here. But it never needed it. The Exorcist is a timeless film that is, in my opinion, one of the all-time greatest horror films, and almost every horror fan needs to watch at least once. I watched it more than once, and I actually watched the director's cut like a couple times. I mean, it really shouldn't matter, okay? It's a great film either way, and it's one of the best horror films of all time, which is a very cliche thing to say, but you want me to lie and say that it's a complete pile of junk? Well, it's not, in my opinion. It's an incredible film, and there really isn't anything more to say. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than The Exorcist. Even with its numerous sequels, you just really can't top this one. And I love every second of it. I'm not going to be reviewing the other ones in the series because I already reviewed all of them, and if I were to review all of them, I would have to rewatch them, and I hate just about 60% of these. The only sequel that I think is worth watching is Exorcist 3. But yeah, anyways, there's more to come. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Word out.